Now more than ever, in a post-COVID society where we recently experienced our government announce a national pandemic, and in turn, we all received a stay-at-home order that was being enforced by the National Guard in certain areas. This made Americans hyper aware of the very real possibility of a military presence that could arrive at any time. In the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment allows Americans the right to bear arms, with the Founding Fathers' idea being that everything needed to have checks and balances to prevent anyone from monopolizing their power through force. The Second Amendment calls for a well-regulated militia, which is at least the idea behind the increase in gun regulations to aim to have a safe environment while still enjoying your freedoms. Overall, there is no need to revise a well-encapsulating statement that was already revised and ratified multiple times by the Founding Fathers for future generations to be able to, as famously said by John Locke, have the right to protect their life, freedom, and property. A society where everyone is empowered to provide checks and balances to a tyrannical government, we must keep the rights to bear arms in America, regardless of the recent increase in gun violence and mass shootings, because we can't let a few bad apples ruin or represent the bunch or majority of citizens that currently exercise their constitutional rights. One second while I pull up some images. Gun rights are based off Second Amendment, which states, as seen above, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. From the United States Bill of Rights, Americans' first main concern for their need to preserve their gun rights in the Second Amendment is to protect their own lives, as well as their families and people they care about. According to a Pew Research Center survey conducted in June of 2021, 4 in 10 US adults say they live in a household with a gun, which means close to half of the homes in America possess a firearm. What is the head of household supposed to do when there's a violent home invasion in the middle of the night? Having the ability to have a gun for protection in such instances with proper training and thought could be the difference between life or death. Also taken from the Pew Research Center, Americans are divided over whether restricting legal gun ownership would lead to fewer mass shootings. About half think it would be better to increase regulation, making it even harder to get a gun, or the opposing feel that it would make no difference. It states at the end of the Second Amendment that these rights should not be infringed upon, which could be interpreted as the unconstitutionality of regulation of the right to bear arms. Next on the list of Americans' main concerns for maintaining their gun rights and why it doesn't need to be revised is the ability it gives you to protect your property, such as your home or your vehicles or whatever objects of value you have. What if you're walking out of a grocery store only to find an aggressive individual trying to steal your vehicle and now your purse? Another prime example of a time a firearm could be threatened, then shown, if needed, with the safety on to stop the burglary in its tracks. In an article off Brennan Center for Justice's website, over in New York last year, the Supreme Court was brought a case to see about further regulation for their now 109-year-old concealed carry handgun law. And the opposing argument was that they shouldn't have to show a special need to get a license to carry a gun that way. In the end, the Supreme Court blocked the law and allowed for the continuation of the constitutional right to bear arms, even on the individual basis. Americans' final concern was to maintain their liberty or freedom as a democratic free market society. This can only happen if the masses are equipped with guns and knowledgeable enough to provide a checks and balances system. The founding fathers wanted to make sure we were ready only if need be to further prevent a tyrannical government from emerging and dragging them back to their revolutionary adversaries, Great Britain. The beginning of the Second Amendment speaks of a well-regulated militia, which can be traced back to the history associated with the Bill of Rights. As stated in the Constitution Annotated's website, that in founding era America, citizen militias drawn from the local community existed to provide for the common defense, and standing armies of professional soldiers were viewed by some with suspicion. That statement accurately describes Americans' feelings then and now towards the reasons for the right to bear arms. In a quote from the National Constitution Center's website, 18th century civilians routinely kept at home the very same weapons they would need if called to serve in the militia, while modern soldiers are equipped with weapons that differ significantly from those generally thought appropriate for civilian use. If Americans don't feel as though that they can change or influence the federal government, then it would defeat the original purpose of coming to the United States for freedom. All Americans still have the right to bear arms, except for an obvious few, like criminals or immigrants who have yet to become citizens. Regardless of the heavier regulations put in place in the recent years due to the increase in mass shootings and gun violence in America, the idea that, again, a few bad apples could represent the entire batch, so to speak, is not realistic. Now, we need to go and focus on the individual's mindset that drove them to those things, as opposed to the tool they used to accomplish their crimes. That is why gun rights given in the Second Amendment were so important. The founding fathers and early thinkers had to go through many wars and troubles to come to an agreement on certain laws. So for them to still be around today is a testament to their value. Every American's right to protect their family, home, and freedom with the right to bear arms is the difference between other countries and how our country is a free market society. There is no need to revise a well-written amendment, although regulations are necessary without infringing upon rights.